Hello and welcome. On quiet nights long ago, people shared stories filled with magic, trials, fear, and hope. Each tale opened a doorway into another world where imagination shines and lessons echo across the ages. Tonight, we step into that timeless realm together. The Devil and his grandmother. In days long gone, when kings still raised great armies, and men bore sword and musket for scant reward, there was a war that consumed the land like a wildfire. The king had gathered countless soldiers under his banner, yet gave them wages so meager that a man could scarcely buy bread with them. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and bitterness filled their hearts. Among these soldiers were 3 companions who often marched side by side. At last they said to one another, "What good is our service? We risk life and limb in battle, yet are rewarded with coins that jingle like mockery in our purses. If we remain, we starve. If we flee, we may yet find some fortune." So they made a secret covenant to desert the army. But one of them, the most cautious, whispered, "Brothers, if we are caught, the gallows will be our fate, and the crows will pick our bones. How shall we escape without being taken?" Another pointed to the wide fields of ripening corn and said, "See there, that golden sea of stalks. If we hide ourselves deep within it, none shall discover us. The army is forbidden to trample the corn, and by morning the regiments are to march away." So into the corn they crept, and the green walls closed about them. Yet fortune betrayed them, for the troops did not depart, but pitched their tents around the very field where the deserters lay. 2 days and 2 nights they crouched among the stalks, parched and faint, their stomachs clawing with hunger, their lips cracked for want of water, and their heads swam with despair. To emerge meant certain death on the gallows, yet to remain meant slow perishing in silence. At last one groaned, "What have we gained by fleeing? We have deserted one death only to meet another, and more pitiful still." Then, as if the heavens themselves had heard, a shadow fell across the field. Out of the sky descended a mighty dragon, its scales glimmering like embers, its breath hot as a furnace. Fire flickered in its eyes, and the air quaked with the beating of its wings. The soldiers, trembling, pressed close together. The dragon fixed its gaze upon them and hissed, "Why cower here among the stalks, men of war?" They confessed their plight. "We are 3 soldiers who deserted, for the king's pay was too small to keep us alive. Now hunger drives us to death if we remain, and the gallows awaits us if we go forth." The dragon replied with a voice like thunder, "Serve me for 7 years, and I shall bear you through the army, so that no hand shall seize you." The men looked at one another, pale with dread. "We have no choice," they said, "for otherwise we perish here." So the dragon stretched forth its cruel talons, seized them, and boom, bore them high through the air, far above tents and soldiers, until the world lay small beneath them, when at last they were set down on lonely ground, far from pursuit. The beast revealed its true nature. It was the devil himself. From its claw, the devil handed them a whip, small and plain, yet gleaming with strange power. "Strike the ground with this whip, and gold shall spring forth in heaps, enough to make you lords, with horses and carriages and rich raiment. But mark me well, when 7 years are done, you are mine, yet I am not unjust. If you can solve a riddle that I shall set, then you shall be free, and the whip shall remain yours." He opened before them a great black book, heavy as stone, and each was compelled to sign his name within. Then the devil unfurled his wings and vanished into the night. With the whip, the soldiers summoned piles of gold until the earth glittered. They bought fine apparel of velvet and silk, rode steeds shod with silver, and feasted in the grand halls of princes. Wherever they went, they lived in splendor, though they did no evil deed. Thus, the years passed more swiftly than they dreamed. But as the 7th year drew near its end, 2 of the soldiers grew sick with dread. Their joy turned to ashes. They sat pale and sleepless, fearing the devil's claim. The 3rd, however, laughed lightly and said, "Brothers, grieve not. I have a keen wit, and I shall find the riddle's answer." One day, as they wandered in the fields, an old woman with a staff approached and asked why their faces were so sorrowful. They tried to dismiss her, but she urged, "Tell me your grief, for who knows if I may help?" At last they confessed all: their bargain with the devil, the wealth he had granted, and the riddle yet to come. The crone nodded slowly. "If you are to be saved, one of you must journey deep into the forest. There you will find a rock shaped like a little hut. Within dwells one older than I, the devil's grandmother. She may help you, for though her kin is wicked, she has a softer heart." The 2 fearful soldiers shook their heads. "What use is this counsel? None can save us." But the 3rd, ever bold, took up the quest and strode into the forest. After long wandering, he found the stone hut and entered. Within sat a bent old woman, wrinkled as a winter apple. She asked whence he came and what he sought. He told her all, and because his manner pleased her, she took pity. Lifting a heavy slab from the floor, she revealed a dark cellar. Hide yourself here. Stir not, nor breathe too loud. At midnight the devil will come, and I shall coax from him the riddle he has devised. He hides nothing from me, for I am his grandmother. Listen well, and when dawn comes, your life may yet be spared. So the soldier crouched in the cellar. At the stroke of 12, the devil swept in, demanding his supper. The grandmother set food and drink, and they feasted. In their talk, she asked, "What tidings, grandson? What souls have you ensnared this night?" The devil grinned wickedly. "I have 3 soldiers safe in my grasp. They cannot flee me. At the year's end, I shall bind them to hell with a riddle they will never answer." "What riddle is that?" asked the grandmother sweetly. "Ha!" laughed the devil. "In the great North Sea lies a dead dogfish. That shall be their roast. The rib of a whale shall serve them as a silver spoon, and the hoof of an old horse shall be their wine glass. Never shall they unravel it." Soon he retired to sleep, and the grandmother lifted the stone to release the soldier. "Did you hear well?" "Indeed," he whispered, "I know enough." He returned swiftly to his companions and told them all. Their hearts grew light, and they cracked the whip to call forth gold until it spilled across the fields. When the 7 years were ended, the devil appeared with his book and said, "The time has come. What feast shall you eat in hell? Answer me if you can." The first soldier spoke. "In the North Sea lies a dead dogfish. That shall be our roast." The devil frowned darkly. The second said, "And the rib of a whale shall be our silver spoon." The devil's eyes flamed, and he growled, The third declared boldly, "And an old horse's hoof shall be our wine glass." At this, the devil howled, a cry that split the air, and fled in fury. His power over them was broken, and he never returned. So the 3 soldiers kept the whip, summoned wealth as they desired, and lived out their days in peace and plenty, free of the devil's snare. Ferdinand the Faithful. Once on a time lived a man and a woman who, so long as they were rich, had no children. But when they were poor, they had a little boy. They could, however, find no godfather for him. So the man said he would just go to another place to see if he could get one there. As he went, a poor man met him, who asked him where he was going. He said he was going to see if he could get a godfather, that he was poor, so no one would stand as godfather for him. "Oh," said the poor man, "you are poor, and I am poor. I will be godfather for you, but I am so ill off, I can give the child nothing. Go home and tell the nurse that she is to come to the church with the child." When they all got to the church together, the beggar was already there, and he gave the child the name of Ferdinand the Faithful. When he was going out of the church, the beggar said, "Now go home. I can give you nothing, and you likewise ought to give me nothing." But he gave a key to the nurse, and told her when she got home she was to give it to the father, who was to take care of it until the child was 14 years old. And then he was to go on the heath, where there was a castle which the key would fit, and that all which was therein should belong to him. Now, when the child was 7 years old and had grown very big, he once went to play with some other boys, and each of them boasted that he had got more from his godfather than the other. But the child could say nothing, and was vexed, and went home and said to his father, "Did I get nothing at all, then, from my godfather?" "Oh yes," said the father, "thou hadst a key. If there is a castle standing on the heath, just go to it and open it." Then the boy went thither, but no castle was to be seen or heard of. After 7 years more, when he was 14 years old, he again went thither, and there stood the castle. When he had opened it, there was nothing within but a horse, a white one. Then the boy was so full of joy because he had a horse, that he mounted on it and galloped back to his father. "Now I have a white horse, and I will travel," said he. So he set out, and as he was on his way, a pen was lying on the road. At first, he thought he would pick it up, but then again he thought to himself, "Thou shouldst leave it lying there. Thou wilt easily find a pen where thou art going, if thou hast need of one." As he was thus riding away, a voice called after him, "Ferdinand the Faithful, take it with thee." He looked around, but saw no one. Then he went back again, and picked it up. When he had ridden a little way farther, he passed by a lake, and a fish was lying on the bank, gasping and panting for breath. So he said, "Wait, my dear fish, I will help thee get into the water." And he took hold of it by the tail, and threw it into the lake. Then the fish put its head out of the water, and said, "As thou hast helped me out of the mud, I will give thee a flute. When thou art in any need, play on it, and then I will help thee. And if ever thou lettest anything fall in the water, just play, and I will reach it out to thee." Then he rode away, and there came to him a man who asked him where he was going. "Oh, to the next place." Then what his name was? Ferdinand the Faithful. So, then we have got almost the same name. I am called Ferdinand the Unfaithful. And they both set out to the inn in the nearest place. Now it was unfortunate that Ferdinand the Unfaithful knew everything that the other had ever thought and everything he was about to do. He knew it by means of all kinds of wicked arts. There was, however, in the inn an honest girl who had a bright face and behaved very prettily. She fell in love with Ferdinand the Faithful because he was a handsome man, and she asked him whither he was going. "Oh, I am just traveling round about," said he. Then she said he ought to stay there, for the king of that country wanted an attendant or an outrider, and he ought to enter his service. He answered he could not very well go to anyone like that and offer himself. Then said the maiden, "Oh, but I will soon do that for you." And so she went straight to the king and told him that she knew of an excellent servant for him. He was well pleased with that, and had Ferdinand the Faithful brought to him, and wanted to make him his servant. He, however, liked better to be an outrider, for where his horse was, there he also wanted to be. So the king made him an outrider. When Ferdinand the Unfaithful learnt that, he said to the girl, "What? Dost thou help him and not me?" "Oh," said the girl, "I will help thee too." She thought, "I must keep friends with that man, for he is not to be trusted." She went to the king and offered him as a servant, and the king was willing. Now when the king met his lords in the morning, he always lamented and said, "Oh, if I had but my love with me." Ferdinand the Unfaithful was, however, always hostile to Ferdinand the Faithful. So once, when the king was complaining thus, he said, "You have the outrider, send him away to get her, and if he does not do it, his head must be struck off." Then the king sent for Ferdinand the Faithful, and told him that there was, in this place or in that place, a girl he loved, and that he was to bring her to him, and if he did not do it, he should die. Ferdinand the Faithful went into the stable to his white horse, and complained and lamented, "Oh, what an unhappy man I am." Then someone behind him cried, "Ferdinand the Faithful, why weepest thou?" He looked round, but saw no one, and went on lamenting. "Oh, my dear little white horse, now must I leave thee. Now must I die." Then someone cried once more, "Ferdinand the Faithful, why weepest thou?" Then for the first time he was aware that it was his little white horse who was putting that question. "Dost thou speak, my little white horse? Canst thou do that?" And again he said, "I am to go to this place and to that, and am to bring the bride. Canst thou tell me how I am to set about it?" Then answered the little white horse, Go thou to the king, and say, if he will give thou what thou must have, thou wilt get her for him. If he will give thee a ship full of meat, and a ship full of bread, it will succeed. Great giants dwell on the lake, and if thou takest no meat with thee for them, they will tear thee to pieces. And there are the large birds, which would pick the eyes out of thy head, if thou hadst no bread for them. Then the king made all the butchers in the land kill, and all the bakers bake, that the ships might be filled. When they were full, the little white horse said to Ferdinand the Faithful, Now mount me, and go with me into the ship. And then when the giants come, say, Peace, peace, my dear little giants. I have had thought of ye. Something I have brought for ye. And when the birds come, thou shalt again say, Peace, peace, my dear little birds. I have had thought of ye. Something I have brought for ye. Then they will do nothing to thee. And when thou comest to the castle, the giants will help thee. Then go up to the castle, and take a couple of giants with thee. There the princess lies sleeping. Thou must, however, not awaken her, but the giants must lift her up and carry her in her bed to the ship. And now everything took place as the little white horse had said, and Ferdinand the Faithful gave the giants and the birds what he had brought with him for them. And that made the giants willing, and they carried the princess in her bed to the king. And when she came to the king, she said she could not live. She must have her writings. They had been left in her castle. Then, by the instigation of Ferdinand the Unfaithful, Ferdinand the Faithful was called, and the king told him he must fetch the writings from the castle, or he should die. Then he went once more into the stable, and bemoaned himself, and said, "Oh, my dear little white horse, now I am to go away again. How am I to do it?" Then the little white horse said he was just to load the ships full again. So it happened again, as it had happened before, and the giants and the birds were satisfied, and made gentle by the meat. When they came to the castle, the white horse told Ferdinand the Faithful that he must go in, and that on the table in the princess's bedroom lay the writings. And Ferdinand the Faithful went and fetched them. When they were on the lake, he let his pen fall into the water. Then said the white horse, "Now I cannot help thee at all." But he remembered his flute, and began to play on it, and the fish came with the pen in its mouth, and gave it to him. So he took the writings to the castle, where the wedding was celebrated. The queen, however, did not love the king, because he had no nose, but she would have much liked to love Ferdinand the Faithful. Once, therefore, when all the lords of the court were together, the queen said she could do feats of magic, that she could cut off anyone's head and put it on again. and that one of them ought just to try it. But none of them would be the first. So Ferdinand the Faithful, again at the instigation of Ferdinand the Unfaithful, undertook it, and she hewed off his head, and put it on again for him. And it healed together directly, so that it looked as if he had a red thread round his throat. Then the king said to her, "My child, and where hast thou learnt that?" "Yes," she said, "I understand the art. Shall I just try it on thee also?" "Oh yes," said he, but she cut off his head, and did not put it on again, but pretended that she could not get it on, and that it would not keep fixed. Then the king was buried, but she married Ferdinand the Faithful. He, however, always rode on his white horse, and once, when he was seated on it, it told him that he was to go on to the heath which he knew, and gallop 3 times round it. And when he had done that, the white horse stood up on its hind legs and was changed into a king's son. The Iron Stove. In the days when wishing was still of some use, a king's son was bewitched by an old witch and shut up in an iron stove in a forest. There he passed many years, and no one could deliver him. Then a king's daughter came into the forest, who had lost herself, and could not find her father's kingdom again. After she had wandered about for 9 days, she at length came to the iron stove. Then a voice came forth from it, and asked her, "Whence comest thou, and whither goest thou?" She answered, "I have lost my father's kingdom, and cannot get home again." Then a voice inside the iron stove said, "I will help thee to get home again, and that indeed most swiftly, if thou wilt promise to do what I desire of thee. I am the son of a far greater king than thy father, and I will marry thee." Then was she afraid, and thought, "Good heavens, what can I do with an iron stove?" But as she much wished to get home to her father, she promised to do as he desired. But he said, "Thou shalt return here, and bring a knife with thee, and scrape a hole in the iron." Then he gave her a companion who walked near her, but did not speak. But in 2 hours he took her home. There was great joy in the castle when the king's daughter came home, and the old king fell on her neck and kissed her. She, however, was sorely troubled, and said, "Dear father, what I have suffered! I should never have got home again from the great wild forest if I had not come to an iron stove, but I have been forced to give my word that I will go back to it, set it free, and marry it." Then the old king was so terrified that he all but fainted, for he had but this one daughter. They therefore resolved they would send, in her place, the miller's daughter, who was very beautiful. They took her there, gave her a knife and said she was to scrape at the iron stove. So she scraped at it for 24 hours, but could not bring off the least morsel of it. When day dawned, a voice in the stove said, "It seems to me it is day outside." Then she answered, "It seems so to me too. I fancy I hear the noise of my father's mill." "So thou art a miller's daughter. Then go thy way at once, and let the king's daughter come here." Then she went away at once, and told the old king that the man outside there would have none of her. He wanted the king's daughter. They, however, still had a swineherd's daughter, who was even prettier than the miller's daughter, and they determined to give her a piece of gold to go to the iron stove instead of the king's daughter. So she was taken thither, and she also had to scrape for 24 hours. She, however, made nothing of it. When day broke, a voice inside the stove cried, "It seems to me it is day outside." Then answered she, "So it seems to me also. I fancy I hear my father's horn blowing." "Then thou art a swineherd's daughter. Go away at once, and tell the king's daughter to come, and tell her all must be done as promised. And if she does not come, everything in the kingdom shall be ruined and destroyed, and not one stone be left standing on another." When the king's daughter heard that, she began to weep. But now there was nothing for it but to keep her promise. So she took leave of her father, put a knife in her pocket, and went forth to the iron stove in the forest. When she got there, she began to scrape, and the iron gave way. And when 2 hours were over, she had already scraped a small hole. Then she peeped in, and saw a youth so handsome and so brilliant with gold and with precious jewels, that her very soul was delighted. Now, therefore, she went on scraping, and made the hole so large that he was able to get out. Then said he, "Thou art mine, and I am thine. Thou art my bride, and hast released me." He wanted to take her away with him to his kingdom, but she entreated him to let her go once again to her father. And the king's son allowed her to do so. But she was not to say more to her father than 3 words. And then she was to come back again. So she went home. But she spoke more than 3 words, and instantly the iron stove disappeared, and was taken far away over glass mountains and piercing swords. But the king's son was set free, and no longer shut up in it. After this, she bade goodbye to her father, took some money with her, but not much, and went back to the great forest, and looked for the iron stove, but it was nowhere to be found. For 9 days she sought it, and then her hunger grew so great that she did not know what to do, for she could no longer live. When it was evening, she seated herself in a small tree, and made up her mind to spend the night there, as she was afraid of wild beasts When midnight drew near, she saw in the distance a small light, and thought, "Ah, there I should be saved." She got down from the tree and went towards the light. But on the way, she prayed. Then she came to a little old house, and much grass had grown all about it, and a small heap of wood lay in front of it. She thought, "Ah, whither have I come?" and peeped in through the window. But she saw nothing inside but toads, big and little, except a table well covered with wine and roast meat, and the plates and glasses were of silver. Then she took courage and knocked at the door. The fat toad cried, "Little green waiting maid with the limping leg, little dog of the limping leg, hop hither and thither, and quickly see who is without." And a small toad came walking by and opened the door to her. When she entered, they all bade her welcome, and she was forced to sit down. They asked, "Where hast thou come from? And whither art thou going?" Then she related all that had befallen her, and how because she had transgressed the order which had been given her, not to say more than 3 words, the stove and the king's son also had disappeared, and now she was about to seek him over hill and dale until she found him. Then the old fat one said, "Little green waiting maid with the limping leg, little dog of the limping leg, hop hither and thither, and bring me the great box." Then the little one went and brought the box. After this, they gave her meat and drink, and took her to a well-made bed, which felt like silk and velvet. And she laid herself therein, in God's name, and slept. When morning came, she arose, and the old toad gave her 3 needles out of the great box which she was to take with her. They would be needed by her, for she had to cross a high glass mountain and go over 3 piercing swords and a great lake. If she did all this, she would get her lover back again. Then she gave her 3 things, which she was to take the greatest care of, namely, 3 large needles, a plow wheel, and 3 nuts. With these, she traveled onwards, and when she came to the glass mountain, which was so slippery, she stuck the 3 needles first behind her feet, and then before them, and so got over it. And when she was over it, she hid them in a place which she marked carefully. After this, she came to the 3 piercing swords, and then she seated herself on her plow wheel and rolled over them. At last, she arrived in front of a great lake, and when she had crossed it, she came to a large and beautiful castle. She went and asked for a place. She was a poor girl, she said, and would like to be hired. She knew, however, that the king's son, whom she had released from the iron stove in the great forest, was in the castle. Then she was taken as a scullery maid at low wages, but already the king's son had another maiden by his side, whom he wanted to marry, for he thought that she had long been dead. In the evening, when she had washed up and was done, she felt in her pocket and found the 3 nuts which the old toad had given her. She cracked one with her teeth and was going to eat the kernel, when lo and behold, there was a stately royal garment in it. But when the bride heard of this, she came and asked for the dress, and wanted to buy it, and said, "It is not a dress for a servant girl." But she said no, she would not sell it. But if the bride would grant her one thing, she should have it, and that was leave to sleep one night in her bridegroom's chamber. The bride gave her permission because the dress was so pretty, and she had never had one like it. When it was evening, she said to her bridegroom, "That silly girl will sleep in thy room." "If thou art willing, so am I," said he. She, however, gave him a glass of wine, in which she had poured a sleeping draught. So the bridegroom and the scullery maid went to sleep in the room, and he slept so soundly that she could not waken him. She wept the whole night and cried, "I set thee free when thou wert in an iron stove in the wild forest. I sought thee and walked over a glass mountain and 3 sharp swords and a great lake before I found thee. And yet thou wilt not hear me." The servants sat by the chamber door and heard how she thus wept the whole night through. And in the morning they told it to their lord. And the next evening, when she had washed up, she opened the 2nd nut, and a far more beautiful dress was within it. And when the bride beheld it, she wished to buy that also. But the girl would not take money, and begged that she might once again sleep in the bridegroom's chamber. The bride, however, gave him a sleeping drink, and he slept so soundly that he could hear nothing. But the scullery maid wept the whole night long and cried, "I set thee free when thou wert in an iron stove in the wild forest. I sought thee and walked over a glass mountain and over 3 sharp swords and a great lake before I found thee. And yet thou wilt not hear me." The servants sat by the chamber door and heard her weeping the whole night through, and in the morning informed their lord of it. And on the 3rd evening, when she had washed up, she opened the 3rd nut, and within it was a still more beautiful dress, which was stiff with pure gold. When the bride saw that she wanted to have it, but the maiden only gave it up, on condition that she might, for the 3rd time, sleep in the bridegroom's apartment. The king's son was, however, on his guard, and threw the sleeping draught away. Now, therefore, when she began to weep and to cry, "Dearest love, I set thee free when thou wert in the iron stove in the terrible wild forest." The king's son leapt up and said, "Thou art the true one, thou art mine, and I am thine." Thereupon, while it was still night, he got into a carriage with her, and they took away the false bride's clothes, so that she could not get up. When they came to the great lake, they sailed across it, and when they reached the 3 sharp cutting swords, they seated themselves on the plow wheel. And when they got to the glass mountain, they thrust the 3 needles in it. And so, at length, they got to the little old house. But when they went inside that, it was a great castle, and the toads were all disenchanted, and were king's children, and full of happiness. Then the wedding was celebrated, and the king's son and the princess remained in the castle, which was much larger than the castles of their fathers. As, however, the old king grieved at being left alone, they fetched him away and brought him to live with them. And they had 2 kingdoms, and lived in happy wedlock. A mouse did run. This story is done. The Lazy Spinner. In a quiet village, far removed from the noise of the great towns, there once lived a man and his wife. The husband was a plain and patient fellow who worked hard from morning till night. But his wife was idle beyond all telling. She neither cared for the hearth, nor the spinning wheel, nor the simple duties that belong to a good housewife. Whatever flax her husband gave her to spin, she left half finished. And when she did make the spindle turn, she let the yarn remain in tangled heaps, never winding it into proper skeins. When the man scolded her gently, begging her to mend her ways, she always had an excuse sharp upon her tongue. "How shall I wind it when I have no reel?" she cried. "You must fetch me one from the forest. If you want it wound, bring me the means to do it." "Well then," said the husband, weary of her words, "if that is all, I will go into the forest, cut some wood, and make a reel for you." Now the wife, who feared nothing so much as honest labor, trembled when she heard this. "If he cuts wood for a reel," thought she, "then I must wind the yarn. And when the yarn is wound, I must begin to spin again. There will be no end to the toil." So she pondered a little while, and a cunning idea sprang into her mind. She waited until her husband had gone into the forest and climbed a tall tree to choose the wood. And then she crept softly after him, hiding herself in a thicket below where he could not see her. She called out in a strange, eerie voice, "He who cuts wood for reels shall die, and he who winds shall perish." The man started, laid down his axe, and listened. hollow. "What was that?" he said. "My ears must be deceiving me." It was naught but the wind singing through the branches. So he took up his axe once more and began to hew. But again, from the shadowed bushes came the cry, "He who cuts wood for reels shall die, and he who wends shall perish." This time he felt a chill creep down his back. He paused and pondered the words. Yet after a moment, he shook off his fear and thought, "It is folly to be frightened by the forest air." And so he raised the axe a third time. Then, more loudly than before, the voice rang out, "He who cuts wood for reels shall die, and he who wends shall perish." The poor man's courage failed him altogether. He let the axe fall, scrambled down from the tree, and hastened out of the forest with trembling steps. Meanwhile, the wife, swift as a hare, ran home by hidden byways, so that when her husband entered the cottage, she was already there, sitting innocently by the fire, as though she had never stirred. "Well," said she, feigning surprise, "have you brought back a fine piece of wood for reels?" "No," said the husband, pale and shaken. "I see clearly that winding yarn is not for us. There is danger in it." And he told her all that had befallen him among the trees. From that time on, he left her in peace, and never again pressed her to spin or wind. But idleness breeds disorder, and after some time, the man again grew troubled. "Wife," said he, "it is truly a disgrace that all the yarn lies in a knotted heap, as though cats had been playing in it. Something must be done." "I will tell you what we can do," said the woman, smiling sweetly. "Since we still have no reel, let us manage another way. You shall go up into the loft, and I will stand down here below. I will throw the yarn up to you, and you will throw it down to me, and so we shall stretch it and make it into a skein." The husband thought this a clever plan, and so they did. Back and forth they tossed the yarn until it was wound into skeins at last. Then the man said, "Now that it is in skeins, the yarn must be boiled." The wife grew uneasy, for new labor threatened her. Yet she said, "Yes, yes, we will boil it early tomorrow morning," though in her heart she was already plotting another trick. At dawn, she rose before her husband, lit a fire, and set a kettle upon it. But instead of putting the yarn into the water, she cast in a lump of coarse tow, which would never serve for good thread. When it boiled, she went to her husband, who was still lying in bed, and said, "I must step out for a little while. You must rise and watch the yarn that is in the kettle, But be diligent, for if the cock should crow and you are not at hand, the yarn will turn to tow." The man sprang up, anxious to prove himself careful. He went to the fire, bent over the kettle, and to his horror saw nothing but a gray lump of tow swimming in the water. Then his heart sank. "Alas," thought he, "I must have lingered too long, and through my neglect the yarn is ruined." He said nothing to his wife, for shame weighed upon him, and from that day forward he never again mentioned spinning or winding. Thus the idle woman lived as she pleased, and the man bore it in silence. But you, dear listener, must judge for yourself. Was she not a sly and odious creature? The 4 Skilful Brothers. There was once a poor man who had 4 sons, and when they were grown up, he said to them, "My dear children, you must now go out into the world, for I have nothing to give you. So set out, and go to some distance, and learn a trade, and see how you can make your way." So the 4 brothers took their sticks, bade their father farewell, and went through the town gate together. When they had traveled about for some time, they came to a crossway which branched off in 4 different directions. Then said the eldest, "Here we must separate, but on this day, 4 years, we will meet each other again at this spot, and in the meantime, we will seek our fortunes." Then each of them went his way, and the eldest met a man who asked him where he was going and what he was intending to do. "I want to learn a trade," he replied. Then the other said, "Come with me and be a thief." "No," he answered, "that is no longer regarded as a reputable trade, and the end of it is that one has to swing on the gallows." "Oh," said the man, "you need not be afraid of the gallows. I will only teach you to get such things as no other man could ever lay hold of, and no one will ever detect you." So he allowed himself to be talked into it, and while with the man, became an accomplished thief, and so dexterous that nothing was safe from him if he once desired to have it. The second brother met a man who put the same question to him what he wanted to learn in the world. "I don't know yet," he replied. "Then come with me and be an astronomer. There is nothing better than that, for nothing is hid from you." He liked the idea and became such a skillful astronomer that when he had learnt everything and was about to travel onwards, his master gave him a telescope and said to him, "With that you canst thou see whatsoever takes place either on earth or in heaven, and nothing can remain concealed from thee." A huntsman took the third brother into training, and gave him such excellent instruction in everything which related to huntsmanship, that he became an experienced hunter. When he went away, his master gave him a gun and said, "It will never fail you. Whatsoever you aim at, you are certain to hit." The youngest brother also met a man who spoke to him and inquired what his intentions were. "Would you not like to be a tailor?" said he. "Not that I know of," said the youth. "Sitting doubled up from morning till night, driving the needle and the goose backwards and forwards, is not to my taste." "Oh, but you are speaking in ignorance," answered the man. "With me you would learn a very different kind of tailoring, which is respectable and proper, and for the most part, very honorable." So he let himself be persuaded, and went with the man, and learnt his art from the very beginning. When they parted, the man gave the youth a needle and said, "With this, you can sew together whatever is given you, whether it is as soft as an egg or as hard as steel, and it will all become one piece of stuff, so that no seam will be visible." When the appointed 4 years were over, the 4 brothers arrived at the same time at the crossroads, embraced and kissed each other, and returned home to their father. "So now," said he, quite delighted, "the wind has blown you back again to me." They told him of all that had happened to them, and that each had learnt his own trade. Now they were sitting just in front of the house under a large tree. And the father said, "I will put you all to the test and see what you can do." Then he looked up and said to his second son, "Between 2 branches, up at the top of this tree, there is a chaffinch's nest. Tell me how many eggs there are in it." The astronomer took his glass, looked up, and said, "There are 5. Then the father said to the eldest, "Fetch the eggs down, without disturbing the bird, which is sitting hatching them." The skilful thief climbed up and took the 5 eggs from beneath the bird, which never observed what he was doing, and remained quietly sitting where she was, and brought them down to his father. The father took them and put one of them on each corner of the table, and the 5th in the middle, and said to the huntsman, "With one shot thou shalt shoot me the 5 eggs in 2, through the middle." The huntsman aimed and shot the eggs, all 5 as the father had desired, and that at one shot. He certainly must have had some of the powder for shooting round corners. "Now it's your turn," said the father to the 4th son. "You shall sew the eggs together again, and the young birds that are inside them as well. And you must do it so that they are not hurt by the shot." The tailor brought his needle and sewed them as his father wished. When he had done this, the thief had to climb up the tree again and carry them to the nest, and put them back again under the bird, without her being aware of it. The bird sat her full time, and after a few days the young ones crept out, and they had a red line round their necks, where they had been sewn together by the tailor. "Well," said the old man to his sons, "I begin to think you are worth more than green clover. You have used your time well and learnt something good. I can't say which of you deserves the most praise. That will be proved if you have but an early opportunity of using your talents." Not long after this, there was a great uproar in the country, for the king's daughter was carried off by a dragon. The king was full of trouble about it, both by day and night, and caused it to be proclaimed that whosoever brought her back should have her to wife. The four brothers said to each other, "This would be a fine opportunity for us to show what we can do," and resolved to go forth together and liberate the king's daughter. "I will soon know where she is," said the astronomer, and looked through his telescope and said, "I see her already. She is far away from here on a rock in the sea, and the dragon is beside her, watching her." Then he went to the king and asked for a ship for himself and his brothers, and sailed with them over the sea until they came to the rock. There the king's daughter was sitting, and the dragon was lying asleep on her lap. The huntsman said, "I dare not fire. I should kill the beautiful maiden at the same time." "Then I will try my art," said the thief, and he crept thither and stole her away from under the dragon, so quietly and dexterously that the monster never remarked it, but went on snoring. Full of joy, they hurried off with her on board ship and steered out into the open sea. But the dragon, who when he awoke had found no princess there, followed them and came snorting angrily through the air. Just as he was circling above the ship and about to descend on it, the huntsman shouldered his gun and shot him to the heart. The monster fell down dead, but was so large and powerful that his fall shattered the whole ship. Fortunately, however, they laid hold of a couple of planks and swam about the wide sea. Then again, they were in great peril. But the tailor, who was not idle, took his wondrous needle and with a few stitches sewed the planks together, and they seated themselves upon them and collected together all the fragments of the vessel. Then he sewed these so skillfully together that in a very short time the ship was once more seaworthy, and they could go home again in safety. When the king once more saw his daughter, there were great rejoicings. He said to the four brothers, "One of you shall have her to wife, but which of you it is to be, you must settle among yourselves." Then a warm contest arose among them, for each of them preferred his own claim. The astronomer said, "If I had not seen the princess, all your arts would have been useless, so she is mine." The thief said, "What would have been the use of your seeing if I had not got her away from the dragon? So she is mine." The huntsman said, "You and the princess and all of you would have been torn to pieces by the dragon if my ball had not hit him. So she is mine." The tailor said, "And if I, by my art, had not sewn the ship together again, you would, all of you, have been miserably drowned. So she is mine." Then the king uttered this saying, "Each of you has an equal right, and as all of you cannot have the maiden, none of you shall have her. But I will give to each of you, as a reward, half a kingdom." The brothers were pleased with this decision and said, "It is better thus than that we should be at variance with each other." Then each of them received half a kingdom, and they lived with their father in the greatest happiness as long as it pleased God. 1 eye, 2 eyes, and 3 eyes. There was once a woman who had 3 daughters, the eldest of whom was called 1 eye, because she had only 1 eye in the middle of her forehead, and the second 2 eyes, because she had 2 eyes, like other folks, and the youngest 3 eyes, because she had 3 eyes, and her 3rd eye was also in the center of her forehead. However, as 2 eyes saw just as other human beings did, her sisters and her mother could not endure her. They said to her, "Thou, with thy 2 eyes, art no better than the common people. Thou dost not belong to us." They pushed her about and threw old clothes to her, and gave her nothing to eat but what they left, and did everything that they could to make her unhappy. It came to pass that 2 eyes had to go out into the fields and tend the goat, but she was still quite hungry, because her sisters had given her so little to eat. So she sat down on a ridge and began to weep, and so bitterly that 2 streams ran down from her eyes. And once, when she looked up in her grief, a woman was standing beside her, who said, "Why art thou weeping, little 2 eyes?" 2 eyes answered, "Have I not reason to weep when I have 2 eyes, like other people? And my sisters and mother hate me for it, and push me from one corner to another, throw old clothes at me, and give me nothing to eat but the scraps they leave. Today they have given me so little that I am still quite hungry." Then the wise woman said, "Wipe away thy tears, 2 eyes, and I will tell thee something to stop thee ever suffering from hunger again. Just say to thy goat, 'Bleat, my little goat, bleat.' Cover the table with something to eat, and then a clean, well-spread little table will stand before thee, with the most delicious food upon it, of which thou mayest eat as much as thou art inclined for. And when thou hast had enough, and hast no more need of the little table, just say, Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away, and then it will vanish again from thy sight. Hereupon the wise woman departed, but Two Eyes thought, I must instantly make a trial, and see if what she said is true, for I am far too hungry. And she said, Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat. And scarcely had she spoken the words, than a little table, covered with a white cloth, was standing there, and on it was a plate with a knife and fork, and a silver spoon, and the most delicious food was there also, warm and smoking, as if it had just come out of the kitchen. Then Two Eyes said the shortest prayer she knew, Lord God, be with us always. Amen. And helped herself to some food, and enjoyed it. And when she was satisfied, she said, as the wise woman had taught her, Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away. And immediately the little table and everything on it was gone again. That is a delightful way of keeping house, thought Two Eyes, and was quite glad and happy in the evening when she went home with her goat. She found a small earthenware dish with some food, which her sisters had set ready for her, but she did not touch it. Next day, she again went out with her goat, and left the few bits of broken bread which had been handed to her, lying untouched. The first and second time that she did this, her sisters did not remark it at all. But as it happened every time, they did observe it and said, There is something wrong about Two Eyes. She always leaves her food untasted, and she used to eat up everything that was given her. She must have discovered other ways of getting food. In order that they might learn the truth, they resolved to send One Eye with Two Eyes when she went to drive her goat to the pasture, to observe what Two Eyes did when she was there, and whether anyone brought her anything to eat and drink. So when Two Eyes set out the next time, One Eye went to her and said, I will go with you to the pasture and see that the goat is well taken care of and driven where there is food. But Two Eyes knew what was in One Eye's mind, and drove the goat into high grass and said, Come, One Eye, we will sit down, and I will sing something to you. One Eye sat down and was tired with the unaccustomed walk and the heat of the sun. And Two Eyes sang constantly, One Eye, wakest thou? One Eye, sleepest thou? Until One Eye shut her one eye and fell asleep. And as soon as Two Eyes saw that One Eye was fast asleep and could discover nothing, she said, Bleat, my little goat, bleat, cover the table with something to eat. and seated herself at her table, and ate and drank until she was satisfied. And then she again cried, "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away." And in an instant all was gone. Two eyes now awakened One Eye, and said, "One Eye, you want to take care of the goat, and go to sleep while you are doing it. And in the meantime, the goat might run all over the world. Come, let us go home again." So they went home, and again Two Eyes let her little dish stand untouched, and One Eye could not tell her mother why she would not eat it, and to excuse herself said, "I fell asleep when I was out." Next day the mother said to Three Eyes, "This time thou shalt go and observe if Two Eyes eats anything when she is out, and if anyone fetches her food and drink, for she must eat and drink in secret." So Three Eyes went to Two Eyes and said, "I will go with you and see if the goat is taken proper care of, and driven where there is food." But Two Eyes knew what was in Three Eyes' mind, and drove the goat into high grass, and said, "We will sit down, and I will sing something to you, Three Eyes." Three Eyes sat down, and was tired with the walk, and with the heat of the sun. And Two Eyes began the same song as before, and sang, "Three Eyes, are you waking?" But then, instead of singing, "Three Eyes, are you sleeping?" as she ought to have done, she thoughtlessly sang, "Two Eyes, are you sleeping?" and sang all the time, "Three Eyes, are you waking? Two Eyes, are you sleeping?" Then two of the eyes which Three Eyes had shut and fell asleep. But the third, as it had not been named in the song, did not sleep. It is true that Three Eyes shut it, but only in her cunning, to pretend it was asleep too. But it blinked, and could see everything very well. And when Two Eyes thought that Three Eyes was fast asleep, she used her little charm. "Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat," and ate and drank as much as her heart desired, and then ordered the table to go away again. "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away." And Three Eyes had seen everything. Then Two Eyes came to her, waked her, and said, "Have you been asleep, Three Eyes? You are a good caretaker. Come, we will go home." And when they got home, Two Eyes again did not eat. And Three Eyes said to the mother, "Now, I know why that high-minded thing there does not eat. When she is out, she says to the goat, 'Bleat, my little goat, bleat.' Cover the table with something to eat. And then a little table appears before her, covered with the best of food, much better than any we have here. And when she has eaten all she wants, she says, "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray," and take the table quite away, and all disappears. I watched everything closely. She put 2 of my eyes to sleep by using a certain form of words, but luckily, the one in my forehead kept awake. Then the envious mother cried, "Dost thou want to fare better than we do? The desire shall pass away." And she fetched a butcher's knife and thrust it into the heart of the goat, which fell down dead. When Two Eyes saw that, she went out full of trouble, seated herself on the ridge of grass at the edge of the field, and wept bitter tears. Suddenly, the wise woman once more stood by her side and said, "Two Eyes, why art thou weeping?" "Have I not reason to weep?" she answered. "The goat which covered the table for me every day when I spoke your charm has been killed by my mother, and now I shall again have to bear hunger and want." The wise woman said, "Two Eyes, I will give thee a piece of good advice. Ask thy sisters to give thee the entrails of the slaughtered goat and bury them in the ground in front of the house, and thy fortune will be made." Then she vanished, and Two Eyes went home and said to her sisters, "Dear sisters, do give me some part of my goat. I don't wish for what is good, but give me the entrails." Then they laughed and said, "If that's all you want, you can have it." So Two Eyes took the entrails and buried them quietly in the evening, in front of the house door, as the wise woman had counseled her to do. Next morning, when they all awoke and went to the house door, there stood a strangely magnificent tree with leaves of silver and fruit of gold hanging among them, so that in all the wide world there was nothing more beautiful or precious. They did not know how the tree could have come there during the night, but Two Eyes saw that it had grown up out of the entrails of the goat, for it was standing on the exact spot where she had buried them. Then the mother said to One Eye, "Climb up, my child, and gather some of the fruit of the tree for us." One Eye climbed up, but when she was about to get hold of one of the golden apples, the branch escaped from her hands, and that happened each time, so that she could not pluck a single apple. Let her do what she might. Then said the mother, "Three Eyes, do you climb up? You with your 3 eyes can look about you better than One Eye." One Eye slipped down, and 3 Eyes climbed up. 3 Eyes was not more skillful, and might search as she liked, but the golden apples always escaped her. At length, the mother grew impatient and climbed up herself, but could get hold of the fruit no better than One Eye and Three Eyes, for she always clutched empty air. Then said Two Eyes, "I will just go up. Perhaps I may succeed better." The sisters cried, "You indeed, with your 2 eyes, what can you do?" But 2 Eyes climbed up, and the golden apples did get out of her way, but came into her hand of their own accord, so that she could pluck them one after the other, and brought a whole apronful down with her. The mother took them away from her, and instead of treating poor 2 Eyes any better for this, she and One Eye and Three Eyes were only envious, because 2 Eyes alone had been able to get the fruit, and they treated her still more cruelly. It so befell that once when they were all standing together by the tree, a young knight came up. "Quick, 2 Eyes," cried the 2 sisters, "creep under this, and don't disgrace us." And with all speed they turned an empty barrel, which was standing close by the tree, over poor 2 Eyes, and they pushed the golden apples, which she had been gathering, under it too. When the knight came nearer, he was a handsome lord, who stopped and admired the magnificent gold and silver tree, and said to the 2 sisters, "To whom does this fine tree belong? Anyone who would bestow one branch of it on me might in return for it ask whatsoever he desired." Then One Eye and Three Eyes replied that the tree belonged to them, and that they would give him a branch. They both took great trouble, but they were not able to do it, for the branches and fruit both moved away from them every time. Then said the knight, "It is very strange that the tree should belong to you, and that you should still not be able to break a piece off." They again asserted that the tree was their property. Whilst they were saying so, 2 Eyes rolled out a couple of golden apples from under the barrel to the feet of the knight, for she was vexed with One Eye and Three Eyes for not speaking the truth. When the knight saw the apples, he was astonished and asked where they came from. One Eye and Three Eyes answered that they had another sister who was not allowed to show herself, for she had only 2 eyes, like any common person. The knight, however, desired to see her, and cried, "2 Eyes, come forth." Then 2 Eyes, quite comforted, came from beneath the barrel, and the knight was surprised at her great beauty, and said, "Thou, 2 Eyes, canst certainly break off a branch from the tree for me." "Yes," replied 2 Eyes, "that I certainly shall be able to do, for the tree belongs to me." And she climbed up, and with the greatest ease broke off a branch with beautiful silver leaves and golden fruit, and gave it to the knight. Then said the knight, "2 Eyes, what shall I give thee for it?" "Alas," answered Two Eyes. I suffer from hunger and thirst, grief and want, from early morning till late night. If you would take me with you and deliver me from these things, I should be happy. So the knight lifted Two Eyes onto his horse and took her home with him to his father's castle. And there he gave her beautiful clothes and meat and drink to her heart's content. And as he loved her so much, he married her, and the wedding was solemnized with great rejoicing. When Two Eyes was thus carried away by the handsome knight, her two sisters grudged her good fortune in downright earnest. The wonderful tree, however, still remains with us, thought they, and even if we can gather no fruit from it, still everyone will stand still and look at it, and come to us and admire it. Who knows what good things may be in store for us? But next morning, the tree had vanished, and all their hopes were at an end. And when Two Eyes looked out of the window of her own little room, to her great delight, it was standing in front of it, and so it had followed her. Two Eyes lived a long time in happiness. Once, two poor women came to her in her castle and begged for alms. She looked in their faces and recognized her sisters, One Eye and Three Eyes, who had fallen into such poverty that they had to wander about and beg their bread from door to door. Two Eyes, however, made them welcome and was kind to them and took care of them, so that they both with all their hearts repented the evil that they had done their sister in their youth. Fair Katrinelje and Pif-Paf-Poltrie. Once upon a time, there lived a curious little fellow by the name of Pif-Paf-Poltrie. He was a wanderer by trade, quick of speech, light of foot, and bold of heart. One morning, when the sun had scarcely lifted the mists from the meadows, he set out with a single thought in his mind. He wished to marry fair Katrinelje, the daughter of Father Hollenthe. So he went straightway to the house, where the shutters were still half closed, and the cock crowed thrice upon the roof. Standing at the gate, he knocked and cried aloud, "Good day, Father Hollenthe." From within came the gruff voice of the master of the house. "Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie. What seek you so early?" And the suitor replied, "May I be allowed to have your daughter?" Father Hollenthe stroked his beard, thoughtful and slow, and said, "Oh yes, it may be so. If Mother Malcho, Brother High and Mighty, Sister Käsetraut, and fair Katrinelje herself are willing, then you may have her." "Where is Mother Malcho, then?" asked Pif-Paf-Poltrie eagerly. "She is in the cow-house, milking the red-spotted cow," answered Father Hollenthe. So off he went, past the orchard, and into the cow-house, where Mother Malcho bent low with her milking pail. "Good day, Mother Malcho," he called. "Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie," said she, wiping the foam of milk from her hands. "May I be allowed to have your daughter?" asked the suitor. Mother Malcho laughed a little and replied, "Oh, yes, it may be so, if Father Holenthe, Brother High and Mighty, Sister Käsetraut, and fair Katrinelje are willing, then you may have her." "Where is Brother High and Mighty?" asked he. "He is in the chamber, chopping wood upon the block," she told him. So Pif-Paf-Poltrie went to the chamber, and there was Brother High and Mighty, swinging his axe mightily. "Good day, Brother High and Mighty." "Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie," said the brother, pausing in his work. "May I be allowed to have your sister?" "Oh, yes," said Brother High and Mighty. "If Father Holenthe, Mother Malcho, Sister Käsetraut, and fair Katrinelje are willing, you may have her." "Where is Sister Käsetraut, then?" asked the suitor. "She is in the garden, cutting cabbages, green and white," answered the brother. Off went Pif-Paf-Poltrie again, into the garden rows, where Sister Käsetraut bent with her knife among the cabbages. "Good day, Sister Käsetraut," said he. "Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie," answered she, looking up. "May I be allowed to have your sister?" "Oh, yes," said Sister Käsetraut. "If Father Holenthe, Mother Malcho, Brother High and Mighty, and fair Katrinelje are willing, then you may have her." "And where is fair Katrinelje?" asked he at once. "She is in the chamber, counting out her farthings," Sister Käsetraut replied. So Pif-Paf-Poltrie hurried to the chamber, and there sat fair Katrinelje, her golden hair bound with a ribbon, her eyes bright as morning, counting her little store of coins, farthing by farthing. "Good day, fair Katrinelje," he said softly. "Many thanks, Pif-Paf-Poltrie," she answered, raising her eyes. "Wilt thou be my bride?" asked the suitor. "Oh, yes," said fair Katrinelje. "If Father Holenthe, Mother Malcho, Brother High and Mighty, and Sister Käsetraut are willing, I am ready." Then Pif-Paf-Poltrie asked her, "And fair Katrinelje, how much dowry hast thou?" She laid her coins in neat rows and answered, 14 farthings in ready money, 3.5 groschen owing to me, 1/2 pound of dried apples, a handful of fried bread, and a handful of spices besides. And many other things are mine. Have I not a dowry fine? But Katrinelje was curious too, and so she asked, "Pif-Paf-Poltrie, what is thy trade? Art thou a tailor?" "Something better," said he proudly. "A shoemaker?" Something better. A husbandman plowing the field? Something better still. A joiner working with wood? Something better. A smith who forges iron? Something better. A miller grinding corn? Something better. Perhaps a broom maker, said she at last, with a sly smile. Yes, that is what I am, cried Pif-Paf-Poltrie, clapping his hands. Is it not a fine trade? And so the tale tells us that fair Katrinelje, with her farthing, her dried apples, her handful of bread and spices, and her dowry of cheerful willingness, was promised to Pif-Paf-Poltrie, the broom maker, who thought himself better than tailor, shoemaker, husbandman, joiner, smith, or miller. And if the two were content, then content they remained. And whether they lived happily ever after, the story does not say. But it is certain that their names are still sung in the old rhymes of the countryside. The shoes that were danced to pieces. There was once upon a time a king who had 12 daughters, each one more beautiful than the other. They all slept together in one chamber, in which their beds stood side by side, and every night, when they were in them, the king locked the door and bolted it. But in the morning, when he unlocked the door, he saw that their shoes were worn out with dancing, and no one could find out how that had come to pass. Then the king caused it to be proclaimed that whosoever could discover where they danced at night should choose one of them for his wife and be king after his death, but that whosoever came forward and had not discovered it within 3 days and nights should have forfeited his life. It was not long before a king's son presented himself and offered to undertake the enterprise. He was well received, and in the evening was led into a room adjoining the princess's sleeping chamber. His bed was placed there, and he was to observe where they went and danced, and in order that they might do nothing secretly or go away to some other place, the door of their room was left open. But the eyelids of the prince grew heavy as lead, and he fell asleep. And when he awoke in the morning, all 12 had been to the dance, for their shoes were standing there, with holes in the soles. On the second and third nights, it fell out just the same, and then his head was struck off without mercy. Many others came after this and undertook the enterprise, but all forfeited their lives. Now it came to pass that a poor soldier, who had a wound and could serve no longer, found himself on the road to the town where the king lived. There he met an old woman, who asked him where he was going. "I hardly know myself," answered he, and added in jest, "I had half a mind to discover where the princesses danced their shoes into holes, and thus become king." "That is not so difficult?" said the old woman. "You must not drink the wine which will be brought to you at night, and must pretend to be sound asleep." With that, she gave him a little cloak and said, "If you put on that, you will be invisible, and then you can steal after the 12. When the soldier had received this good advice, he went into the thing in earnest, took heart, went to the king, and announced himself as a suitor. He was as well received as the others, and royal garments were put upon him. He was conducted that evening at bedtime into the antechamber, and as he was about to go to bed, the eldest came and brought him a cup of wine. But he had tied a sponge under his chin and let the wine run down into it, without drinking a drop. Then he lay down, and when he had lain a while, he began to snore, as if in the deepest sleep. The 12 princesses heard that, and laughed, and the eldest said, "He too might as well have saved his life." With that, they got up, opened wardrobes, presses, cupboards, and brought out pretty dresses, dressed themselves before the mirrors, sprang about, and rejoiced at the prospect of the dance. Only the youngest said, "I know not how it is. You are very happy, but I feel very strange. Some misfortune is certainly about to befall us." "Thou art a goose, who art always frightened," said the eldest. "Hast thou forgotten how many kings' sons have already come here in vain? I had hardly any need to give the soldier a sleeping draught. In any case, the clown would not have awakened." When they were all ready, they looked carefully at the soldier, but he had closed his eyes and did not move or stir, so they felt themselves quite secure. The eldest then went to her bed and tapped it. It immediately sank into the earth, and one after the other they descended through the opening, the eldest going first. The soldier, who had watched everything, tarried no longer, put on his little cloak, and went down last with the youngest. Halfway down the steps, he just trod a little on her dress. She was terrified at that, and cried out, "What is that? Who is pulling my dress?" "Don't be so silly," said the eldest. "You have caught it on a nail." Then they went all the way down, and when they were at the bottom, they were standing in a wonderfully pretty avenue of trees, all the leaves of which were of silver and shone and glistened. The soldier thought, "I must carry a token away with me," and broke off a twig from one of them, on which the tree cracked with a loud report. The youngest cried out again, "Something is wrong. Did you hear the crack?" But the eldest said, "It is a gun fired for joy, because we have got rid of our prince so quickly." After that, they came into an avenue where all the leaves were of gold, and lastly into a third where they were of bright diamonds. he broke off a twig from each, which made such a crack each time that the youngest started back in terror. But the eldest still maintained that they were salutes. They went on and came to a great lake whereon stood 12 little boats, and in every boat sat a handsome prince, all of whom were waiting for the 12, and each took one of them with him. But the soldier seated himself by the youngest. Then her prince said, "I can't tell why the boat is so much heavier today. I shall have to row with all my strength if I am to get it across." "What should cause that?" said the youngest. "But the warm weather. I feel very warm, too." On the opposite side of the lake stood a splendid, brightly lit castle, from whence resounded the joyous music of trumpets and kettle drums. They rode over there, entered, and each prince danced with the girl he loved. But the soldier danced with them unseen, and when one of them had a cup of wine in her hand, he drank it up so that the cup was empty when she carried it to her mouth. The youngest was alarmed at this, but the eldest always made her be silent. They danced there till 3 o'clock in the morning, when all the shoes were danced into holes, and they were forced to leave off. The princes rowed them back again over the lake, and this time the soldier seated himself by the eldest. On the shore, they took leave of their princes and promised to return the following night. When they reached the stairs, the soldier ran on in front and lay down in his bed. And when the 12 had come up slowly and wearily, he was already snoring loudly that they could all hear him. And they said, "So far as he is concerned, we are safe." They took off their beautiful dresses, laid them away, put the worn-out shoes under the bed, and lay down. Next morning, the soldier was resolved not to speak, but to watch the wonderful goings on, and again went with them. Then everything was done just as it had been done the first time, and each time they danced until their shoes were worn to pieces. But the third time he took a cup away with him as a token. When the hour had arrived for him to give his answer, he took the 3 twigs and the cup and went to the king. But the 12 stood behind the door and listened for what he was going to say. When the king put the question, "Where have my 12 daughters danced their shoes to pieces in the night?" he answered, "In an underground castle with 12 princes," and related how it had come to pass, and brought out the tokens. The king then summoned his daughters and asked them if the soldier had told the truth. And when they saw that they were betrayed, and that falsehood would be of no avail, they were obliged to confess all. Thereupon the king asked which of them he would have to wife. He answered, "I am no longer young, so give me the eldest." Then the wedding was celebrated on the self-same day, and the kingdom was promised him after the king's death. But the princes were bewitched for as many days as they had danced nights with the 12. The white bride and the black one. Once upon a time, a woman went wandering with her daughter and her stepdaughter across the wide open fields, where the grass was high and the sun beat down. They were cutting fodder for the cattle, when along the dusty path there came a poor man walking slowly towards them. His clothes were patched, his sandals worn thin, and his face was lined with hunger and hardship. Yet it was no beggar they beheld, but the Lord himself, who had chosen to walk upon the earth in humble form. He greeted them and said gently, "Which is the way into the village?" The mother frowned and would not look at him. "If you wish to know," she answered sharply, "seek it for yourself." Her daughter tossed her head with disdain and added cruelly, "If you are afraid of losing your way, then hire a guide, for I will not show you." But the stepdaughter, whose heart was pure, laid down her bundle of grass, came forward, and said with kindness, "Poor man, I will take you there. Come with me, and I shall guide you." Then the Lord turned his face away in anger from the hard-hearted mother and her daughter, and he said, "As black as night, and as hideous as sin, so shall ye both become." And instantly their faces darkened, and their beauty withered, until they were ugly beyond words. But to the stepdaughter he was gracious. He walked beside her, and when they were near the village, he blessed her, saying, "Choose 3 things for thyself, and I shall grant them to thee." The maiden bowed low and spoke, "First, I wish to be fair and beautiful, shining like the sun at dawn." At once her skin gleamed white, and her face became radiant as morning light. "Secondly," she said, "I wish for a purse of money that shall never be empty." The Lord placed such a purse in her hands, heavy with gold. "And third," said the girl softly, "I wish that when my time comes, I may dwell in the eternal kingdom of heaven." And this also he promised her. Then the Lord vanished from her sight, and the maiden went home. When the stepmother and her daughter beheld her beauty and her blessings, envy like poison grew in their hearts. They plotted day and night how they might harm her. Now the maiden had a brother named Regener, a good and faithful man who loved her dearly. She told him all that had happened. One day he said to her, "Dearest sister, I would paint thy likeness, that I may behold thee always before my eyes, for my love for thee is so great." The maiden agreed, but warned him, "Let no one else see it. I beseech thee, So Reginer painted her portrait, fair as the sun and gentle as dawn, and hung it in his chamber. But Reginer was no common man. He served as coachman in the palace of the king. Each day he gazed upon the painting and gave thanks to God for such a sister. Now it so happened that the queen of the land had lately died, and she had been so fair that no one could compare with her. The king grieved bitterly, for he thought none could ever match her beauty. Yet the courtiers noticed that Regina gazed daily at a portrait, and jealousy moved them to whisper to the king. The king commanded that the picture be brought before him. When he beheld it, he started in wonder, for it was like his lost queen in every feature, only fairer still. A fire of love awoke in his heart. He summoned Reginer and asked, "Whose likeness is this?" Reginer replied truthfully, "It is my sister." Then the king said, "No woman but she shall be my bride. Take carriage, horses, and garments of cloth of gold, and fetch her to me." So Reginer rode forth. The maiden rejoiced at her fortune, but the black daughter was filled with malice. She cried to her mother, "What good are all your arts if you cannot win such luck for me?" "Be still," said the witch mother, "I shall turn it to thy gain." By wicked magic, she clouded Reginer's eyes until he was half blind, and she bewitched the white maiden's ears until she was half deaf. Thus they set out, the bride in royal garments, the black daughter and her mother beside her, and Reginer upon the coachman's seat. As they journeyed, Reginer sang out in loving tones, "Cover thee well, my sister dear, that the rain may not wet thee, that the wind may not soil thee with dust, that thou mayest be fair and bright when thou standest before the king." The bride asked, "What is my dear brother saying?" The old witch answered slyly, "He bids thee give thy golden robe to thy sister." So the maiden obeyed, and the black daughter arrayed herself in the shining gown, while the true bride was given only a ragged gray smock. Again, Reginer called the same words, and again the maiden asked. The old witch lied, saying, "He bids thee give thy golden hood to thy sister." So the bride gave it, and her hair was left uncovered to the wind. A third time Reginer sang, and the stepmother said, "He bids thee lean from the carriage and look forth." But they were crossing a bridge over deep water. As soon as the maiden leaned out, the stepmother and her daughter pushed her over. She fell, and the waters closed above her. Yet in that very moment, a snow-white duck rose from the depths and floated down the stream. Reginer, half blind, saw nothing amiss and drove on to the palace. where the black daughter was presented as his sister. But when the king beheld her ugliness, he raged with fury. Yet the witch so bewitched him with cunning words and false enchantments that he took the black maiden to wife, and Reginer was cast into a pit filled with serpents and adders. Now listen. One evening, as the false bride sat on the king's knee, a white duck swam up the kitchen gutter. It spoke to the kitchen boy. "Boy, kindle me a fire that I may warm my feathers." The boy obeyed. The duck sat by the hearth, shook her feathers, and asked, "What is my brother Reginer doing?" "He lies imprisoned in the pit of snakes," answered the boy. "And what is the black witch doing?" "She is seated with the king and loved by him," said the boy. "God have mercy on him," sighed the duck, and swam away. The next night she came again, and the third night as well, asking the same questions. At last the boy told the king. The king resolved to see for himself. On the third night he hid by the hearth. When the duck came and asked her questions, he drew his sword and cut off her head. Instantly, the white duck was gone, and there stood before him a maiden of surpassing beauty, fair as the picture painted by Reginer. The king rejoiced, clothed her in splendid garments, and she told him all that had befallen her, the treachery of her stepmother, the falsehood of the black maiden, and her own enchantment. Her first plea was for her brother to be freed. The king granted it at once, and Reginer was lifted from the pit, weak but alive. Then the king summoned the witch and her daughter, and asked, "What punishment does she deserve who betrays the innocent, casts her into water, and steals her place?" The witch, blinded by her own malice, replied, "Such a one should be stripped, thrust into a barrel set with nails, and dragged by a horse over the wide world." "So shall it be," said the king, and it was done to the witch and her daughter. But the fair maiden was made queen, and Reginer was richly rewarded and raised to high honor. And thus virtue was crowned, and wickedness met its rightful end. The Three Black Princesses. In the faraway lands of East India, calamity befell the people, for a cruel enemy had encircled the city and swore he would not depart until he had wrested from them 600 bright silver dollars. Fear spread through every house and every hearth, until at last the townsfolk, in their distress, sent heralds beating drums through every street and market. The proclamation rang out, "Whosoever shall procure the demanded ransom shall be raised above all others and made burgomaster of this town." Now in that place lived a poor fisherman, who daily cast his nets upon the wide lake. He had little wealth but a single son, his faithful companion on the water. Misfortune came swiftly, for the enemy seized the boy, carried him off, and, mocking the father's sorrow, placed $600 in his hand in exchange for the lad. With heavy heart, but firm resolve, the fisherman brought the ransom to the town's great men. The enemy, satisfied, lifted their siege and vanished over the hills. And so, according to their own decree, the townsfolk set the fisherman in the high seat of burgomaster. But they also commanded with iron law that whosoever addressed him without saying Mr. Burgomaster should surely die upon the gallows. Meanwhile, the fisherman's son, by fortune or fate, escaped from his captors. Wandering long and far, he came at last to a wild forest upon a lofty mountain. There, before his very eyes, the mountain opened as though by sorcery. And within, he beheld a grand, enchanted castle. The halls were vast and solemn, and every table, every chair, every bench was hung in deepest black. Presently, 3 young princesses appeared, their gowns also of mourning black, their faces pale, save for a small touch of white upon each cheek. They spoke to him kindly, saying, "Be not afraid, stranger. We mean thee no harm. Indeed, thou alone canst deliver us from this spell." The youth, eager and bold of heart, answered, "Gladly would I aid you, if I but knew the way." Then they revealed their strange command. "For 1 full year thou must dwell with us, speaking not a word to us, nor gazing upon us with thine eyes. Yet whatsoever thou shalt desire, only ask. And if it be within our power, we shall grant it." So he remained in that gloomy castle for many days. At last, longing welled up in him to see once more his father. The maidens granted his wish. "Go then," said they, "but take with thee this purse, which is ever full of money, and this coat, which is no common garment. Yet mark well, within 1 week thou must return." No sooner had he clothed himself than he was borne through the air and set down in East India. Yet when he sought his father at the humble fisherman's hut, it was gone, and the people told him sternly, "Call him not fisherman, or the gallows shall be thy reward." At last he found his father, now splendid in burgomaster's robes, and cried, "Father, fisherman, how camest thou here in such state?" Alarmed, the man whispered, "Child, speak not so. If the town's rulers hear it, thou wilt hang." But the boy persisted, unheeding, until indeed he was dragged before the judgment seat and condemned to die. Upon the gallows he begged, "Grant me but one request. Let me go once more to the old hut of the fisherman." They consented, and he returned, donned his ragged smock, and came before the town once more, saying, "Look upon me. Am I not the son of the poor fisherman, who in this very garb earned bread for his parents?" Then his father's eyes were opened, and he knew him again, and fell upon his neck, begging forgiveness, and took him home with joy. There the son told all that had befallen him, the mountain that opened, the black-draped castle, the 3 princesses bound by a dreadful spell. His mother, trembling, warned him, "Such enchantments are not to be trifled with. Take holy water, boil it, and sprinkle it upon their faces, so shalt thou break their darkness." So the son returned, but fear gnawed at him. At night, while the maidens slept, he crept to their chamber and sprinkled the boiling water upon them. At once their faces turned half white, half black. Then the 3 princesses leapt up, their eyes burning with fury. "Accursed one," they cried, "because of thee, our deliverance is lost forever. No man born upon the earth, nor ever to be born, may set us free. Our 3 brothers, bound by 7 chains, shall come, and they shall tear thee limb from limb." Then arose a dreadful shrieking throughout the castle. In terror, the youth fled, leaping from a high window, and in his fall, he broke his leg. Behind him, the castle shook, groaned, and sank into the earth. The mountain closed once more, and none could ever tell where that enchanted place had stood.